Good morning, everyone, and we're going to talk about fosfomycin. Okay, it's a one of the newer antibiotics. I mean, really an old antibiotic uh, that has been now repurposed into being used in ICUs. As I told you, the antibiotic pipeline is almost dry. Okay, we barely have any antibiotics, and I shudder with the view that if any of my children has got a knee issue, and later on 10 years from now, any of our children has a knee issue and he goes to a hospital for an antibiotic because he had infection there. I don't think we'll have an antibiotic that will help them. I think now at this moment we are talking of sepsis because of bowel leak and this and that or killing patients, right? But there will be a time when a simple knee issue, a small infection in the paronychia may also kill the patient. May also kill the patient. So it's going to be a big issue here. Well, so let's look at a case over here. Okay. So we'll relate to these cases because it's a COVID case after all. So we'll relate to these cases. So this is a 65-year-old diabetic hypertensive male on regular steroids. That means he's asthmatic. Never went out of the house. Okay, that's the usual history. I never went out of the house, but I still got COVID. Okay, D1 not on day one he was not okay. He had a reduced appetite and a loss of smell along with malaise. So clear-cut viral pathology is what he had. So he went to the general physician. He took up temperature. Temperature was high, and he started him on everything. Okay, so the general physician nowadays start on everything possible that is there. That is Clexane, Favipiravir, HCQS, Ivermectin, Doxycycline, Keftam, Zincovir, Vitamin C, turmeric milk, Tioa, and budesonide, Kada. Yesterday night, when lady called me up at 12:30 in the night and asked me, "Can I have Kada?" I said, "Is this a time to call me? Is it an emergency medicine you're asking me for?" I mean, I don't know. Kada has become so important. I never knew what Kada was. I recently understood what Kada is. Kada is apparently something that they boil and make. So my mother knows it. I didn't know what it was. So my mom told me, you boil many things together and make it. Basically, it's nothing. It's useless, I feel. So she also asked me in the night at 12:30. I first answered that question well. I told, yes, you can. Huh? Then 2-3 minutes later, a WhatsApp message came to me. Is it okay if I take steam inhalation? I said, yes, if your face wants to become better. If you take steam inhalation, probably it will help your face to get more better. Okay, so day 3, the RT-PCR became positive. Okay, day 3, the RT-PCR becomes positive, and now the entire story goes as to what is to be done further. All right, not moving ahead. Okay, so the fever comes in, the cough becomes intractable now. Okay, till now there was no cough. Now the cough becomes intractable. This is what we normally see. The fever comes in, and then a couple of days later, the cough becomes intractable. So the GP who's actually looking at this patient starts feeling that this patient is looking breathless. The patient itself starts feeling breathless, and the saturation has now dropped to 92%. So the very classical case that happens in COVID. Okay, he becomes wheezy, he doesn't feel okay. So the GP who looks at this patient decides, no, this patient needs further support. Let's transfer him to the hospital. And that's how this patient goes to the hospital. In the hospital, he reaches over here at day 7. He's in the hospital. Till day 6, he was in home quarantine. And when we first evaluated him, what did we find? We found that he had a respiratory compromise with PF ratios that were very low. We found out that he had IL-6 level, CRP, ferritin, D-dimer all in the elevated ranges. Okay. Then we found out that the neutrophil lymphocyte ratio was elevated and the LDH was more than 500 with increased troponin, the clotting index that was very high. That means a proper regular COVID case, hypercoagulable with hyperinflammatory with the presence of PF ratios that was on the lower side. A regular case, nothing new in this case is what I would say. Uh, why is it not going here? Okay. So what did we start? We started this patient on IV remdesivir. We gave them 6 milligrams of dexamethasone. We gave them high dose vitamin C, ulinistatin, a helmet CPAP with an FiO2 of around 80%. And we put them on Clexane 0.6 BD because we had a TEG report that shows a hypercoagulable state. Along with IV Eloris and tocilizumab was given. This was a time when we were using tocilizumab quite regularly. We were, so we gave tocilizumab in this case, and this is day 4 post tocilizumab. We're looking at day 4 post tocilizumab. Okay, now we have day 4 means we are along day 12 of this patient coming to the hospital. All right. So breathing got worse. The SpO2 further reduced on NRBM. Helmet he was not tolerating anymore. The CRP was more than 40. The ferritins were also high up. Neutrophil lymphocyte ratio seems to be elevated. Still LDH, however, BP became borderline, 100 systolic. Till now it was 120, 130, 140. Now it becomes 100 systolic. Okay, the blood cultures were negative and there was a vague abdominal pain that came in. The PCT showed 0.12 with a beta D glucan of 78, which indicates there may be probably a fungal infection here also coming up slowly. So day 4 post, then the breathing, what we did, we actually stopped everything. We tried to put that helmet back again. We started patient TPN. Okay, we did that on day 4, and we had no other option but to intubate him after that. So we intubated this patient, and day 8, that is day 8 post TOSI, we found a further drop in the blood pressure. He required higher doses of smaller doses initially of NORAD and all. We added at that moment meropenem. Remember, he was on Yloris only. That was our baseline drug that we started. And then when he worsened, we started the patient on meropenem, teicoplanin, and fluconazole as a combination, because we thought that if we went tocilizumab, so let's give him a higher generation. We sent blood cultures and we sent beta D glucan. Okay, so we don't know now what happened after day 8. Now day 10, what really occurs is all this is still going on this patient. Okay, all this is still going on, but now there is a bigger drop in blood pressure. That's now day 10 post OC, a larger drop of blood pressure with very high dose of noradrenaline vasopressin being added. The lactates did start going trending upwards. Number 4, we are at 26. Procalcitonin, which was 0.12, has gone to 2.9, and we decided to further, because the beta D glucan, which was 76, went up to 150. We thought there was a trend of an increased beta D glucan, which is a biomarker for fungal sepsis. We started this patient on micafungin. So we had a combination of now meropenem, teicoplanin, micafungin, fluconazole omitted, and we did an X-ray. Now we did the blood culture. Now this is what the blood culture looked like. We had a blood culture that showed Candida auris and Enterococcus faecium. Now, if you look at the Enterococcus faecium, Candida auris, if you see, it is sensitive to micafungin, so we were right on starting micafungin there. So we started micafungin there. But if you look at the culture pattern on Klebsiella pneumonia, look what it is showing. It is showing resistant to almost everything, on sensitive only to colistin and to L-Auris is what it shows, but L-Auris was not working. It was very clear that we had started L-Auris. This means to say that don't bank on the sensitivity report. In vivo sensitivity can be very different from in vitro sensitivity. Okay, it's very different, both of them. So L-Auris here was sensitive, but this patient didn't do well. He was only sensitive to colistin. And what we found out from an E-test, an E-test is a very different method to figure out whether it doesn't come in the white egg, it's different. You have to put it separately. So you will not get fosfomycin, and that fosfomycin we found E-test was sensitive. So everything has resistant minocycline intermediate, and a fosfomycin that was sensitive. Now what happened? Day 12, he further worsened. We started the patient of fosfomycin 4 grams 4 hourly, but day 14, this patient passed away. So there are a few questions that comes to my mind at this stage. Okay, the first question was, what was my inertia considering COVID? The patient had very deep lymphopenia. The lymphopenia was too bad. So should we have attempted to give the antibiotic or whatever antifungal or a higher generation much more earlier? Should we have just broadened the spectrum earlier, because this patient had worsened very quickly? So these are all dilemmas that are there. I'm not very certain. Retrospectively, there are a lot of dilemmas that come to your mind as to what we should have done here. So the COVID-related dilemma over here is this COVID-related problem, or is it a bacterial infection that is causing the issue? COVID itself can cause a cytokine storm, causing the same manifestations that we just now saw. Okay, and the bacterial sepsis can also present the same way. For example, you can have fever, you can have hyperleukocytosis in cytokine storm as well as in bacterial infection. You can have severe hypoxemia. ARDS can go into any patient of sepsis can go into ARDS. There can be extensive bilateral radiological infiltrates, which you call as ARDS, even in bacterial sepsis. Biological inflammatory syndrome is there. I mean, even in sepsis, you'll have the same things: CRP going up, the ferritin going up, the LDH going up. You'll have the same thing there also. And traditional definition of VAP will not work also here. So was this VAP was the question. After we put the tube, 5 days later, you had the drop of vasopressors and increase in supports and all. This is what we saw, right? So could this have been VAP? But traditional definition of VAP will not work only in COVID, because COVID already has got so many shadows here in their periphery. So it may not work only in this traditional definitions over here. The heavy bacterial load was there, but in the bronchial secretions, WBCs were very low. So we're not very certain what's happening like that. So should we have done repeated routine ET secretions from the time that the patient was admitted into the hospital with an endotracheal tube? That's the questions that come in when we talk about COVID and this. Rather, now if I were to actually take COVID as a part of immunosuppression, in any immunosuppressed patient, would it make sense for me to take routine bronchial lavages or routine endotracheal tube aspirates to pick up the infection earlier? Because we are expecting this to be either ventilator-associated pneumonia from some nature. That's why this patient worsened so quickly. So, or in the first instance, should I just started everything? Colistin, fosfomycin, minocycline, and aztreonam. That's what was sensitive. So should I just have started on the first instant rather than waiting for meropenem alone? Should I just started that? That was the big dilemma that came to my mind. Okay, so considering these dilemmas, um, uh, let's see the first instance. What if I would have started colistin, fosfomycin, minocycline, acetonitide, the first instance? Now look at this. This is our culture in the last 1 year. This is last 1 year ka culture ka hai. This is the last 1 year. Okay, and when you look at the sensitivity, see the x-axis shows Klebsiella, Pseudomonas, E. coli, Acinetobacter. Blue means it's resistant. Okay, blue means it's resistant. So for colistin, see the Pseudomonas is completely resistant. Klebsiella almost you have good number of resistance. E. coli, Acinetobacter, you got good resistance patterns. So when you look at fosfomycin, the graph you're seeing on the right is fosfomycin actually. Okay, so on fosfomycin you see the resistance pattern is not as bad as colistin. Okay, for fosfomycin. If you look at Klebsiella, again there also it's not very bad is what it looks like, at least in our pattern. In fact, for E. coli, it seems to be extremely good. So it looks like if you have E. coli, fosfomycin may be the way to go, at least in our hospital, because this is what it shows over here. And the World Health Organization has actually taken this fosfomycin as a last drug. So remember this. This is a reserve group, last resort antibiotics from the WHO. They agreed a summary that was released last year, actually said that Aztreonam, fourth generation cephalosporins, Cefepime, fifth generation cephalosporins, Ceftaroline, it's called as Zinfo, it's just come in, and polymyxins, that is polymyxin B and colistin. Okay, apart from fosfomycin, linezolid, tigecycline, and daptomycin are the restricted group of antibiotics or the antibiotics of last resort. We don't have anything further. So we have to deal, we are going to deal with this. You all are all going to deal with this only for an entire next 5 to 10 years, because we don't see any new antibiotics coming in the pipeline. Okay, so these are the reserve or last group. So we normally want to start as a last group. So why would I start it as first? Are you understanding? So the question that comes is, as an intensive care doctor, I also have a kind of responsibility to the community, because I may instill collateral damage, a large amount of collateral damage. If I want to give directly higher generation antibiotics and antifungals, there may be a possibility of very high emergence of resistance patterns. So that is why I don't want to inflict that kind of a collateral damage. And that is the reason that I'd like to preserve these antibiotics rather than giving it at first go. Our question was, should we have given it at first go? All these antibiotics, these are the all restricted antibiotics. Why would I give it first go? So I don't think that is really justifiable in these cases. And fosfomycin actually figures out over here in the same thing. Okay. So what are the EMA, I mean, European Medicine Agency's recommendations is to restrict the use of fosfomycin. That's what everyone is saying. Restrict, don't use it right, left, center, like how we thought, just give it in the starting. Don't do that. And it is specifically telling to use it in cases of only to be used in cases of hospital-acquired pneumonia, including ventilator-associated pneumonia. So maybe in this case, we had a ventilator-associated pneumonia. We were on meropenem, it didn't improve. We should have probably started fosfomycin earlier. What is the good stuff about this particular antibiotic? See, the good stuff about this is that it's got a very low molecular weight. Since it's got a very low molecular weight, it will go in quickly. It will go to different places very quickly. The second thing is it has a relatively long half-life. So this means to say that it will remain in the body for a longer period of time. Okay, so that means to say if I dose it and I dose it well, it's probably going to be above the minimum inhibitory concentration of the particular bug for a long time. It's got an active transport mechanism for, there's an active transport mechanism which takes this into the cell. It penetrates biofilms very well. Biofilms are problematic. They are the enemy of the intensive care doctors for certain, because the biofilms penetration is a very big problem. So there is a penetration of biofilm with this. It is a hydrophilic antibiotic, and that's why it can probably move to various compartments very more easily. Very low serum protein binding, that means the clearance is very comfortable. It is bactericidal, very important. It kills, it doesn't just make it bacteriostatic, it is bactericidal. It's got good synergism. That means to say, when it works with another antibiotic on its own, it may not be a great antibiotic, but when it works together, it kinds of causes a synergistic action, and the bacteria definitely, it is definitely worse for the bacteria because of the synergistic action. And it is a very safe antibiotic for the kidneys, is what it looks like. Okay, so there is a lot of good things about this fosfomycin, I feel. Okay, so this is a study that was done from Austrian University, University of Graz, Austria. Now, what is this? So they try to figure out whether what is the concentration. So since we're talking of ventilator-associated pneumonia, what is the concentration in the lung? So how do you do that? You actually put a microdialysis probe, a probe that goes inside the lung, and then from the lung, it finds out how much of the antibiotic is there over there. The real point is it has to reach there, right? If you're going to give something, has it reaching there? It's not necessary that you might have the best of the best antibiotic, but if it doesn't penetrate, what is the point? Okay, so if it was sensitive on the in vitro, it has to reach that place. Then only it becomes kind of sensitive to the organism, isn't it? So they did this study where they looked at 8 people. Out of the 8 people, one person they could not follow up, but they followed up 8 people in these, and they gave them fosfomycin. Okay, so they were looking at penetration here. So look at penetration here. So this is plasma, healthy lung, and infected lung. Okay, so when you look at it, when you look at the AUC 0 to infinity, 665, 367, 315. So infected lung and healthy lung, they have almost have the same penetration. Did you see that? So it doesn't mean that if you are inflamed, it doesn't penetrate. It is penetrating. It is definitely penetrating. Okay. So in an inflamed lung, it penetrates equal like a healthy lung. So this means to say the penetration is pretty good and the half-life remains, in fact, better, 2.7. Okay. So there is a clear-cut penetration into the infected lung. So that is one thing. The second thing is, if you look at this, the dark black score, the dark black marks are the plasma. The triangles are the healthy lung, and infected lung is 0. The 32 means the minimum inhibitory concentration, MIC. Okay, so most of these organisms that are sensitive, they'll be MIC will be 32. MIC means minimum inhibitory concentration. So if you look at this MIC, most of the time it's above that. Most of the time it's above 32. Okay, this means to say um, uh, this uh, this means to say that this most of the remains more than 32. Okay, now um, let's go ahead. Now, what about the dosage intervals? So we talked about the fact that it has got a long half-life, but if you use it for 12 hours and you have the MIC is 32, if you look at that, what is what is the meaning of time above MIC? It means the time of that the antibiotic remains above the minimum inhibitory concentration, and usually it has to be like that for at least 40% of the dosage interval. Let me explain to this one more. This is the MIC. All right, this is the MIC. The antibiotic has to remain above the MIC most of the times. You understand? Huh? If it remains for the, say, I have an 8-hour interval, 8-hour, 8-hour, 8-hour. So at least for 40% of the 8-hour interval, at least 40% of the 8-hour interval, MIC. You got the point? Can I? You want to hear this once more? So I'll explain to you once more. Say you have 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours. This is the MIC. The antibiotic has to, the concentration of the antibiotic has to be up. This is the interval. So at least for 40% of the interval, at least for 40% of the interval, at least for 40% of the interval, the MIC has the antibiotic has to be above the MIC. Okay, so in difficult to treat infections, it will not be 40%, it may be even 70-80% for all that you know. So here, if you look at it, now plasma 63 and at a healthy lung 44 and 41. So it's not extremely good. But when you go to 8 hours, see what happens. At 8 hours, the plasma concentration is going up. At the same time, in the healthy. Okay, so this means for 24 grams, it seems that should be the dose that should be used here. Okay. So this is a dose finding study that tells you this. Okay. So this is 4 grams, 12 grams. And then when you say 24 grams, that is when it starts working. So the average dose that you probably need to give to go above the MIC for 40% of the time should be ideally 24 grams. So very clearly it is proven here also that if you were to give them 24 grams, this is what would occur to the organism. This is the bacterial concentration. So it goes down in 24 hours, goes down and then remains down. Okay, it goes down 24 hours, goes down and then remains down. So this means to say the dose should be somewhere around 16 to 24 grams at the minimum. Okay, now look at this particular study that came out. This was intravenous fosfomycin for the treatment of CRKP, that is Klebsiella, carbapenem resistant Klebsiella pneumonia. And they had a very sick group of individuals. Look at the Apache score 24. So a sick group of individuals that they had in this case. Okay, and out of those 11 cases that they had, you had 2 bacteremic, there were 3 VAP and bacteremia, there was 2 VAP and UTI. So there were actually total 5 VAPs over here, and there were 3 bacteremic cases. That means very sick patients who received this particular antibiotic. The treatment was with either colistin, gentamicin, or a combination of piperazine and tazobactam. That means it has got good synergism. That good synergism helped in good bacteriological outcome, good clinical outcome and all the infections were cured in these patients. The all-cause hospital mortality was 18.2. Usually 35% is the mortality when you have sepsis. It's 18.2. So there is definite improvement in mortality, synergistic action, and very quick bactericidal effects. Here also, if you look at this, is an RCT of VAP only ventilator-associated pneumonia. Since our case was VAP, this is again VAP again coming over here. Group A was empirical systemic antibiotics, and Group B was empirical systemic plus oral fosfomycin. So simple thing, systemic plus oral fosfomycin. And what they found out was those who received oral that group actually survived more than others. Now this particular study is a very large study, quite often quoted in 2017, 2018 also this has been quoted. That intravenous fosfomycin, all about intravenous fosfomycin in different kind of infections. And what is clear is that what is clear is that if you were to use fosfomycin, there seems to be some kind of beneficial effect in most of the studies that they have quoted over there. Even in the biofilm associated pneumonia, which is a part of BAP, BAP is part of biofilm, isn't it? BAP increases because there's a biofilm there. So 80% of human bacterial infections are biofilm related. Soon after intubation, a mixed biofilm harboring microbial pathogens is formed on the endotracheal tube. Okay, biofilms are present in the interior and the distal third of the endotracheal tube. 70% of BAP patients have identical pathogens present in the ET biofilm and the lung. Okay, this means to say that what is there in the biofilm is what goes into the lung. So if you target the biofilm, there's a very high possibility that you'll target the lung too. That's the question. That's the point we're trying to make. So if you look at this biofilm, this is a biofilm experiment where if you look at these empty bars, they are the bars in which there is a clearance, the amount of clearance that has occurred. So see the amount of clearance that has occurred when you use fosfomycin compared to all other antibiotics. So there is daptomycin, tigecycline, but when you have a combination of fosfomycin, rifampicin, it looks like the clearance is the maximum. This is what it looks like. So among the entire populations of complicated UTI, CNS infections, pneumonia, bacteremia, almost 81.3% of this particular study did well, and all those patients who had more than one multi-drug resistant organisms, they did well. That is what it looked like in this. Okay, in this study. Now, carbapenem resistance is a big problem, definitely. So we are dealing with almost 60% resistant organisms, carbapenem resistance. This is India there, very high resistance compared to the world, very, very high. Okay. So we are the only drug that we are looking for is colistin during this time. And colistin per se is now, it is signifying that colistin, the outcomes are not good with colistin. So we cannot use colistin time and again because the outcomes are not good now with colistin. That's what we've really we found out. So what we also know is that the colistin usage is very, very identical to the amount of carbapenem resistance that has occurred. So because of the fact that we're using too much of colistin is not working anymore. Second thing, we are badly using it. We don't know how to dose it. The dosing is probably not okay, and bugs are getting a little bit more stronger is what it looks like. And that's the reason probably we may have to use fosfomycin. There's a resurgence of this particular drug. It is used, it has to be used beyond. It is actually proven for urinary tract, very good for urinary tract because it gets completely excreted in the urine. So fosfomycin you have to try to use it beyond the urinary tract and beyond the GI tract. And I think this old antibiotic will be probably the way to go. Because of the fact that it's got low molecular weight, it's got too many good stuff in it, which includes penetrating biofilms, hydrophilic, low serum protein binding, bactericidal, good synergism, and it's very, very safe in the kidneys. Thank you very much.